Well, I guess what we're going to do now here is we got this Mauser. We're going to pull apart the rest of this Mauser. Well, I guess what we're going to do now here is we've got this Mauser that's been sporterized, and we're going to put on this set of Tally scope mounts. They're 1 inch, and the way that these are designed is instead of having your separate, say, rail section that you mount and then you have your scope mount on top of there, the way these Tally rings are set up, the base and the scope rings are all one unit. They're supposed to be really sturdy. We'll see how they do. I don't see how they can be anything but, since they're all one piece. Have to experiment with a little bit. I just now pulled them out of there, so I haven't even looked them over. A lot of this will depend on from the person doing the install. Does it make things more complicated, the fact that it's all one unit, or is it easier? That's one of the things that I'm going to try and determine, so I'll let you know. I think it'll probably make it easier, but the fact that it's all one unit is going to make it that much more critical that whenever you mount these and when you do this, that you get them straight. Because if you get them at any kind of angle, you're not going to have any play between your rail, your base, and your scope rings. It's all one deal. So if you get them cocked on there sideways at all, then that's going to squeeze on the scope tube and cause you all kinds of problems. Of course, that'll all be, proportional to how far off you've got it. But one of the good things is that since this is designed, these scope rings are made for this Mauser, and so you've got the proper contours right here, and so that really will do a lot to help you make sure that you're centered up and you're in the right place. But again, like I say, it's just one of those things that it's something to take in consideration, and we'll go from there. So first thing that we'll do, we're going to get the bolt out. And of course, it goes without saying, check the firearm. Before you start working on it, I did that. I visually inspected it before it went into this vise. Even though I know I've already inspected it when I first got it, I inspected it next time I picked it up, every time I picked it up since, every time I've moved it, I've looked. I did it again. Visually check. Put your finger in there. Make sure. More people get shot with unloaded guns, which is kind of stupid because there are no unloaded guns, right? But anyways, get your bolt out, and in case anyone doesn't understand how that happened or I did it too quickly, you basically just rack your bolt. You've got a lever here on the side, open it up, and it'll come right out. Now, just so I'll go ahead and get this out of the way, whenever you go to put this back in, you're going to have to pull that lever and get it in there. Your magazine follower is in the way. You have to push it down before you can get your bolt to go home. So just one of those little things. So anyways, I'm going to rearrange a few things here, clean this off, and get the camera moved to where you all can see what I'm doing here, and get my ugly mug off of here, and we'll be right back. We're going to do now, since the scope combination that was supplied for this Mauser, the scope's just too damn big to work with a Mauser that still has this military style barrel with the military style sights and everything. So we're going to remove the barreled action, and then we're going to take a propane matte gas heater, and we're going to remove the front and rear sights. They're soldered on, and we'll heat that up and remove those. But first we got to get the barreled action taken apart, and then we'll go from there. So get it secured into our vise really well. I guess probably the first thing that I'll do is go ahead and remove the sling. Well, let's see here. Maybe I can get by without removing it. Hopefully I can. That'll just be one less thing to have to keep up with. So, grab some of our screwdrivers here. I'm going to have to get me another set of these gunsmith screwdrivers for this bench over here. Now I don't know if you can see. What I'll do here is I will try and move this around to where you guys can see this, because on these Mausers and some of the military stuff, I've seen this actually in aviation. It's a locking feature that they use. Let me step around here and I'll zoom in. Try and get them both there. Now what you've got, start over here, actually got a locking feature there. You've got this screw or bolt head locks this one in, and you've got part of it cut out, so what you have to do is this one, you have to twist it first. It doesn't have to necessarily be removed, but once you get it lined up, then you can go and remove the other one, which is the main one. Same thing for back here, but this one is actually already lined up, so I don't have to do anything for it. I'm going to make a little adjustment to it. I was getting a little bit of resistance there when they come around. There we go. It was just a little bit indexed the wrong way. There we go. And on this 96 Mauser, your long piece of hardware is the rear. There's what those bolt heads look like. And I'll turn this up and zoom us out. Zoom us. What I was thinking. Go ahead and remove our bolt. Should have done that first, but oh well. Lift up on the barreled action. It will come straight out. This is the part we're wanting to work on. We'll set it off to the side And what we need to do is, while we've got it in here, go ahead and take the time to inspect everything. Make sure that everything looks like it's in good shape. I went ahead and removed the other two locking screws just so I can check behind and make sure that everything looks like it's in good shape while you've got it apart. It is. We're going to leave the bottom metal in. I went to pull on it. It's a little tight in there, so I'm not even going to mess with it. So we'll set the stock aside and come back after I have my barreled action chucked up. Go. Now we've got it loosened, and we're in, got everything where we know it's loose there. I'm going to spray a little PB Blaster right in here, let it get into our screw hole, knowing that that's been loosened up real good, and we'll remove that and then we'll get it the rest of the way off of there. Alright. I'm having to work it back and forth because it's essentially cutting threads where it has trash and stuff in there. Now, a lot of people argue with the way that I go about that. They say you should remove that first. I like to hammer it a little bit and try and get it to loosen up some first. It makes it, it's a lot easier on my screwdrivers, that's for sure. That is for certain. There we go. And that is the front sight ring. Off of our Mauser. See how she cleans up here. A little bit of crap in there, but that's alright. We'll probably end up putting that back on just for aesthetics. I don't know. We'll see how it all plays out. But we'll go from there. Now we'll move on to the back. Now we're going to remove the rear sight leaf here. Got a pin. I'll put my hand here so I can catch that pin as it comes out, if it flies out. There's our pin. Now some of these have a big old leaf spring underneath there. This one does not. It may have had one at one point in time. It's gone now, whatever, but that's your rear sight ladder and rear sight. And that leaves us with the rear sight base. That's what we're after. That's what we want off of there. Now, on a number of these, like you've got a hole right there, you'll have a grub screw in there holding it in like a set screw, and I won't know until I get in here, but there could be other set screws and stuff in here, but they're filled in with solder, and so there's no way to know until you just dive into it, start heating it, and go from there. Do not use acetylene or a cutting torch or anything like that. You just need, just a good old propane torch, and heat it up, and you're well on your way to being done. All right, what we got going on here is we're going to heat up this Mauser's rear sight base because it's soldered on, so we can remove it. I'm going to use some of this heat control paste here to try and protect everything. This heat control paste, really, for what we're doing here, is not that necessary. I'm not going to be heating it up that much. This is more for welding, but it will help a little bit. And also, I got a rubber piece there that I'm using to protect it, so that'll protect my rubber piece. And the way this stuff works is it just burns off as the heat gets to it. It doesn't have to be a big thick layer, and for no more heat than what I'm going to be putting on it, that'll be fine. That'll keep the heat contained to that area. This stuff works phenomenally whenever you're welding. Alright, like a chicken with my head cut off again. Story of my life. Alright, got my brass hammer ready, and what I'll do, I'm going to try and get this over here a little closer where you guys can really see. There we go. I'm starting to see some solder bubbling up there. Where a little bit of the solder has bubbled up. and there's that. Part of what gets it off of there is you're heating it up and expanding it as well. So a lot of times you'll scratch your barrel up and everything doing it. There's not really much of a way that I know to mitigate the possibility of scratching the barrel and everything. If anyone has a way of not possibly scratching the barrel as you remove that, please let me know. I would love to know. Doesn't mean that you're always going to scratch it, but there is a good possibility. And we'll see here. I don't know. I'm not 100% sure that it is scratched. But you can see there where it's come off. I'm not sure that that scratches. It just might be where it's drug some of this dirt. So what I'll do, that is not a hole in the barrel. It's just a set area for a pin to have gone. And what I'll do is I'm going to get some towels and some water, and I'm going to heat this solder up, and we're going to remove this solder here in just a minute. Alright, Brillo pad, got a little bucket with some water in it, and just going to dip it in. Dip the Brillo pad in, and heat up this solder. You can see it bubbling. You can see the solder's already bubbling, but the reason I'm continuing to do this is because I want to get that metal hot enough to keep the solder melted. Get a little bit more there. Now the next thing I'm going to do is use compressed air. So what we'll do here, I'll come around from this side. Alright, that's not going to work. So now we'll just go to a good old-fashioned brush. Still a good bit of solder on there. We're going to try something else. I'm going to be using some of the birchwood casing, the plum brown, and I've never used it over the top of solder. I'm going to see how it does on solder. It may or may not have good results. We'll see. What you do is you just want to heat your metal up that you're going to brown to where 475, 400 degrees, where water would sizzle on the surface. Once you get it hot, then you paint your birchwood casing on there. Done. I went ahead and just heated up the rest of the barrel a little bit. Didn't get it to where it was really hot, just wanted to get a little sizzle, probably a couple hundred degrees. Went ahead and ran my brown all over, so we kind of are blending the coloration. And what I'm going to do now is take a towel and wipe it down with water, and then we will see what we have, and we may end up putting another coat on. We'll just have to see how it turned out. You got to be careful with this. You got to be real careful, because you can really get a lot of surface rust quickly if you don't do this the right way, if you don't take precaution and get your preservation oil and stuff on there. As it stands, I'm going to go ahead and do another coat. And then after that coat's done, I'll wipe it down again, and I'll do a preservation oil. All right. Get me some more cotton balls here. Had a little something stuck on there. see where we stand. There's a possibility that by the time this is all said and done, that I may just have to strip this barrel and blue it or rebrown it from scratch. But I would rather go ahead and, if you call it a waste, a little bit of this product on here, we'll just see how it turns out. If it turns out good, great. Turns out bad, all I did was waste a little bit of time and a little bit of product on it. And so, a lot of times stuff like that's worth it to at least see how it's going to turn out. And then go from there. So, we'll let it cool down, let it work. And go ahead and I'm going to wipe it off of our barrel up here. I'm not liking what I'm seeing. What it appears we've got going on here is some of the stuff that was on the barrel, just the finish of the barrel here. It seems that where it was weak, it got spotty. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and blast this, and I'm going to re-blue this barrel real quick and make it look real good. I'm going to go ahead and pull apart the rest of this Mauser, the barreled action, because I'm going to put it in the blaster. So we've got our trigger right here. Go ahead and you got a pin there that goes through that trigger. That holds your trigger in. Now, you've got a pin right here. And as far as those two pins, they are, for all practical purposes, identical. Let's see here. I'm going to see if they're the same diameter here. 19, same diameter. So those pins could be interchangeable. And you notice I'm holding pressure down. You're going to have your trigger spring there. And there we go. You've got your bolt release there. I'm going to find the biggest screwdriver I can possibly use and it still fit properly. What I'm going to do here is tighten this up because I don't want to have it slip on me. We'll go ahead and leave that. put this back in there, and that is exactly how it will go. You got a spring in there. For right now, I'm not going to pull this apart. It's really just getting it, pulling it out of there. So, but for now, we're going to leave that together because I'm not trying to do a trigger job or anything like this on this. I'm just wanting to strip it down so I can blast it and not worry about it. Now, one of the things I'm going to do on this one before I do blast is I'm going to take some modeling clay and I'm going to dam up both ends of the barrel, and because I'm not doing, you know, full cleans, all that stuff on this one. All I'm doing is the rear sight, or, you know, just putting the scope on. So I'm going to dam that up, and while I've got it all stripped down, I'll go ahead and get my scope bases drilled, tapped, and mounted. Just wanted to run this down and check. I have one drilled and tapped. It's always a good idea just to go ahead and double check and make sure. So as you can see, I've got the lasers here where they intersect right over it. Now I'm going to move and center it up on this one. I'll bring my tap down, and now I can see that my tap is a little bit off. And normally I would have gone all the way through, tapped and everything without moving the position, but because of some other factors, I went ahead and drilled both of these holes, and now I'm coming back and tapping. So, and like you see, I've got the tap in the drill, and I'm just doing this by hand here. I'm holding, let me zoom out here. I'll get a little bit back. You saw the first one there. And now what I'm doing is holding a little bit of pressure up here, just letting the weight of my hand hold pressure on here, and just with my hand I'm turning. And if you want, you can look up here on your dial and you can actually see it dropping as you run your tap in, just like normal. Break it off, break your chips off by going backwards. I'm not changing the pressure I'm putting on my hand at all. All I'm doing is just backing up. I'm letting the threads move the head and my hand up and down. I'm not pulling down. It's just the weight of my hand is all that this is. And you don't want to back up to break your chips off until you've turned, at least a turn and a half, because you don't want to have, just a, part of a thread in there and then try and back it out and expect that to be the one thing that lifts your hand in the head and everything. So I feel a little resistance, but shouldn't be much. And whenever it bottoms, you'll know it. There we go, we're at the bottom. Now we'll back it back out. And right whenever you start getting to about where the top is, you could start easing a little bit of pressure off. You don't want it to be able to fling out of there. You want to keep it to where whenever the tap pulls away from the threads, it's because you let pressure off of it. Because if you allow it to pull itself out of there, it can damage the very first thread there. There we go. Once I find that. Use the pipe for lining everything up. that was for is just a bevel, just to make it easier to get the tap started. Going the wrong way there, lefty. What I'll usually do, especially since I'm using just a chuck here, is I'll get it where I can feel it touching the sides, and I'll take that and I'll work it up and down. As I work it up and down, I'll tighten some and then loosen it where I'm scraping the inside of those jaws. That way, if there's anything in the way, you know, any shavings or anything that gets caught in there, I'm scraping them off of there, so it'll be a little bit, ideally will run a little truer. Now that looks like it's pretty straight. A lot of times whenever you tighten this up, you'll get it where it will wobble some. And I mean, I'm not going to be turning it on to tap with, but that'll help me see if I've got a wobble, make sure that it's straight. And it's looking straight. So double check, make sure that everything's lining up, nothing's moved. We're in good shape. There we go. Same as before. You just want to hold a little downward pressure. Back up a little, break the chips. I think we're at the bottom. Yep. There we go. Blow that out, and we will test a piece of hardware in there. We can always clean the threads up by hand with the tap. Alright, and it's threaded in and it is working. Alright. One more left to do. And now that I've got this one on there, what I'll do to get the last one figured out, so I'm going to go ahead and run my piece of hardware into this hole, tighten it up, and by the fact that I've got it tightened up in there, it should align itself fairly closely. Alright, get my chuck here, my key, there we go. What I'll do, I'm going to take the tap out and I'll replace it back. You see what I've done here I cut the tip off of that one so I can use it to get this width down lower, because if I tried to use one like this, that nipple there on the end could plunge too far and go farther than we need it to go. A lot of times you have to modify the tools that you've got. It's nothing out of the ordinary. Alright, that's looking straight. We'll Tighten it a little. Still looking straight. Tighten it some more. Got a little bit of a wobble. Loosen that some. And I've tried to where you give about equal pressure on all 3 holes going around the side, tightening, and I've gotten no better results that way. So I just do what I found works for me. All right. We're going to do a eyeball center job here. All right. There's that. Now that I've got it marked and everything's set, I'm going to go ahead and remove this so I don't damage my mount. Make sure that we come down to the same spot and change this out. We're going to flip it around. Looking pretty straight. Change over so I can bevel the edge of that, so it'll be easier to get the tap started. Because I'll zoom in here and I'll show you that once I've beveled it and then I run the tap through, you'll notice that the bevel goes away. That's because the threads take up that beveled area. Zoom in here. Be all right. You got that beveled area there. Yeah, you can see a little bit of it. Here, I'll try and get you a little closer. You see the beveled area. Here we go. How about this? We'll try and zoom you all in here. tap's looking straight. Try again. Still looking straight. Get a little bit of some tapping fluid in there. Set it in and twist. And the tapping fluid that I'm using there is just good old-fashioned CLP from Safariland. I think I purchased it at Walmart. And if you watch closely here, whenever this thing stops rotating, you might see that little tap rotate a little bit. You might see it get a little torsion to it, a little flex to it. Right there, that's the end. You can just barely see a twist, see a bow to it whenever. Now on the thicker taps, you don't get that. But on these thin ones, you watch that line there, your reference point, and you can see them bow a little. Alright, blow it out. Yeah, there's still a little bit of the beveled area in there. I may have gone just a little deeper on that one, which shouldn't be a problem. The only thing that I worry about there is if I went too deep, the thread's not catching, but I think that we will be okay. And even if we're not, we'll make it okay. Yeah, we're good. Threads catch just fine. Everything's going to be solid. And of course, it'll all be Loctited in there really well. Very important, because I want to show you here. Do you see how little, what the small amount of threads that's sticking out there? That right there, you're going to have 4 of those. And that's all that's responsible for holding these scopes into these. You go any deeper, you'll be into your chamber and into your bolts action and area and all that stuff. So it's very important to use good Loctite or thread maker. What I did was, just while it was sitting right here and already chucked up, I scrubbed it real good with steel wool, and then I took some Oxbow, let's see here, which one did I use? Some Brownell's Oxbow Blue, gun bluing solution, and I scrubbed all that real hard with the bluing solution. Did a few coats of it, wipe it down with a wet rag, and blow it off. Repeat. And now what you see on there is actually a Birchwood Casey Barricade. It's just on there for a rust preventative, and I'm going to let that Birchwood Casey soak in real good, because it actually will soak in, and it will keep the bluing from actually rusting the barrel, because that's part of the bluing process. And then we'll come back and we'll take a look at it, and we'll evaluate what it looks like, and if it looks good enough for government work, then we'll go ahead and put the scope rings on permanently, lap the scope rings in, and put it all back together. If not, we'll have to look into blasting this down and rebluing the barrel. Hopefully this will be adequate. As I like to do before I mount the base, the scope base, I use the KFOS and treat this area. Of course, I've used, here we go, the powder blast. There's a few different options out there. Brake parts cleaner, whatever you want to do. This brake-free powder blast, it's a little bit cheaper than brake parts cleaner sometimes not. And it's a little bit less abrasive, and it's less apt to remove some of the patina off of an older gun. But anyways, clean it up, get rid of all oils and solvents and everything. And then for a job like this, rather than using a cotton ball where you're going to soak a lot up, I'll just use a Q-tip And I just go in here, and anywhere that's going to be under that base, I'll go ahead and treat down in there. That way I don't have to worry about corrosion underneath it, because especially if you have dissimilar metals, if you're running an aluminum base and a steel receiver, you can have dissimilar metals that will cause a lot of corrosion. If anyone's ever pulled an aluminum head from, like on a car, if you pulled that aluminum head and it was on a steel block, you'll know what I'm talking about, especially some of the older stuff. So treat that so you don't have to worry about it. And just like with the rest of the stuff, we'll come back to it a little bit later. I'm going to go ahead and treat all of this a little. And we can always come back to this and do the rest of it, but the important parts now are done. And once it has had a chance to set up, which is about 15 minutes, we'll come back and we'll mount our bases. I'll go ahead, actually I got to clean these bases first, and then I'm going to put KFOS on them as well. Alright, I have these mounted on, and basically all I did, I'm sorry I was on the phone and was working, I just put a little bit of red Loctite after the KFOS dried, about 15 minutes, set my mounts on there, take the hardware and some red Loctite, a good liberal amount of Loctite on the threads of the hardware, of the screws, and tighten them up. They don't need to be real tight. I just use a supplied wrench that comes with it, and just kind of 3 fingers on it, and just, you know, give it a good snug, and go back and forth on them, and you'll feel them when they're about done. Now what I've done, and here's something else. I went ahead and mounted this front ring, or the base half there, to the base prior, because this is the turn-in style, to where it has to be turned 90 degrees, and then you turn it. I didn't want to load that hardware unless I had to, so I went ahead and put it in the vise, got it all lined up, got it at a perfect 90 to each other off of here. So on some of them you may not be able to do that because your scope rings may cover up your base mounting hardware. On this one it did not. So I went ahead and mounted that. These right here, this back one is loose because you've got adjustments. You've got lateral adjustments on it. If you will look there, let's see. Right here, you can loosen one side and tighten the other, or vice versa, and you can move this rear left and right. And that's for a number of reasons. You know, that'll help you line up any imperfections in the way you mounted it, but also left or right-handed people, you may want to skew it one way or the other. You may need that much adjustment. You may find that your particular gun is just all to hell. But either way, it gives you some adjustment there. So now what I'll do, I have my 1-inch piece of chromoly steel tubing. I think that Wheeler Engineering sells a kit for this. But I'll run it in, and then what I'll do is I'll put my front on, tighten it all down. It doesn't have to be super tight, but what I'll do then is if everything's not lining up, if it's angling us one way or the other, then I'll put some lapping compound in here, and I'll take this and I'll lap it. Basically what I'll do is I'll hone and cut these rings and everything to where they're a straight, perfectly straight axis. Because if you don't do that, then you can actually have your scope rings and everything torque on your scope tube and distort it and all that good mess. See, right now if you look here, that's everything on and mounted the way that it should be, but I'm still getting some clearance issues there. So what I'll do is put some good lapping compound in there. I'll tighten them down and just sit and lap on it until I get it to where it all sits nice and smooth. And if it matters to you, pay attention to the way that your markings go. These are lapels, they have an L on them. I'm going to face them back towards the shooter. Because once you have done this, they are actually going to, it's going to matter which direction they face and which base they're on. And so it's one of those things to where you can't make any guarantees that someone that ends up with this is going to not pull it apart and neglect to put it back together properly. But for right now, it's going to be together properly. So what we'll do, we're going to put some lapping compound inside of there and lap it. So now that I make sure that I'm going to turn, I'll pick both of these up. I'm going to put lapping compound inside the rings. We'll snug it back down, and I'm not tightening it all the way. We're just snugging it. And then we'll start going with it. Get my lapping compound in there. Going ahead and getting the these two top rings first. I'll get the bottom. Wiping this off so I don't have problems getting it to sit down in there. Alright, see, has an L on it. I don't know how well you'll be able to see it. It's not wanting to focus, is it? Oh well, it's got an L on it, I promise. Alright. Now what we're going to do is, before I start lapping, I've got to worry about this rear adjustment here. In case anyone doesn't understand what I'm saying L-A-P-P-I-N-G, not L-A-U-G-H-I-N-G. I'm not laughing. Alright. Now I'm going to make sure that this is lined up to the base. And I can actually look through here and see the end of the bore and do a decent job of lining it up. Almost. There we go. I got to get my drill press secured in sometime soon. Brush makes things a little easier, a little nicer. It's not quite as messy on you. Now that I've got it where it's like that, I'll go ahead and tighten it up some. What I'm looking for, since I don't have it completely tight, where it's snug down, is the gap on each side here. I want that gap to be close to the same from the left hand side to the right hand side. The gap doesn't necessarily have to be the same for the front to back because you're dealing with two things that are independent of each other, and you can't really gauge one off of the other. Alright, I got it a little bit too tight for me to move it, so back it up there. Alright. Turn that off, I'll be back. Now something else, you want to make sure not to go too far, because it actually is possible that if you were to clamp it all the way tight, you could actually hone it out to where the scope would slop around in there. So all you're really trying to do is get it to where if you've got any angles, when it's attached to both points, you're getting everything, you're line boring it is what it boils down to. You're boring it all to where it will be on the same axis, a true line, a true axis. And since I've put no real torque on this hardware here for just the caps for the scope rings, I'm not worried about making sure that it's the right ones in the right spot and all that. Now if I put if I'd already torqued them down and used some Loctite and all that, I might be a little bit more specific about it. So now, see what we've got here. We know that, you know for sure that you're changing something by the fact that it gets easier when it was harder. That tells you that you are in fact making a difference. And we can see right there Let's see if I can get you guys zoomed in where you can see. Do you see the shiny parts? Let me get a good hold on the camera. You'll see the shiny part there and the shiny part right there. That's on those two leading edges, that was the high points. Those were the parts that were keeping me from being able to turn or move the pole in there, and that was the parts that were making this angle up. And now granted, I did look and make sure these were not indexed. They did not have a front or a back. Because I did double check to make sure. So got a little bit of wear on those, but not as much. The base is here. That's where it mostly was. Any number of things that could be causing that in there. So anyways, we lined it now, and what we'll do is clean all this up, and then we'll mount the scope and see how it looks. Cleaned everything out. Now I've laid my scope down. No Loctite or anything like that. Just snugging it down. Trial run. I do recommend when you're at this stage, and any stage, whenever you're tightening up the hardware for your scope, you do not tighten one ring up entirely without making the other one match. You want to run them down almost equally, because you don't want to have an issue with just kicking it kicking it one way or tightening just one down and then having the other one off kilter. You want to be able to tighten them down uniformly. Alright, and here we're going to throw the Mauser back together. I painted a little bit of frog lube down here in the magazine well, just to make sure that everything's going to flow smoothly. And we have our barreled action here. So what I'll do is the first thing that we need to do is get this chucked up so we can put our all the trigger components back in, and I'll readjust the computer, good lord, I'll readjust the camera and we'll do the trigger group and then we'll put it in our stock. Alright. As always, I like to paint a little frog lube on everything that moves and anything that could corrode. Frog lube on the trigger real good. No, I'm not doing, this isn't a frog lube treatment because I'm not using heat. So it's not quite the same. But it's still better than any other CLP that I have found. The stuff never ceases to amaze me. I always try and put it on the springs because you'd be amazed at how it'll smooth up something just by allowing the spring to slide freely within its area. I can't hold on to that.